because when I was in medical school almost 30 years ago, there was no such thing. Nobody knew anything about gut health. Like, legit, no one knew anything. If you would have talked about the gut, you would have been probably sent off to the dean's office and told that you need to tighten that up because I came from a very basic science institution, one of the top 10 medical schools in the country, and they didn't entertain a whole lot of that. Although I did take a course way back then, about 30 years ago, in what we used to call alternative medicine, right? Nowadays, it's functional, integrative medicine, holistic medicine, specialized and precision medicine, which is what I currently practice now. And if you need help with that, if you need help getting some precise help for just you and your body and how you can crush your health and your life, feel 10 to 20 years younger, please reach out to me, thomashemingway.com, Dr. Thomas Hemingway on Instagram, Thomas Hemingway MD on Facebook. I'd love to help you with that. And without further ado, I'm going to get into this show because today we're going to talk about how you can get your gut strong and the top 8 tools to optimize your microbiota and rebuild your health. Last week, we shared about the first 4, and I'm not going to get too into a review here because you can go back and re-listen. But number 1, we talked about feeding your microbiota with fiber fuel, right? And fermented foods. And there's literally thousands of fermented foods that you can dig into. They're all over the world. There's so many cool ones out there. Tool number 2 was the perfect trifecta for gut health, the prebiotics, the probiotics, and the postbiotics, what I call the microbial trifecta. Tool number 3, we talked about the lifestyle stuff because somehow, some way, even in that dark stretch of intestines, your gut is aware of what you're doing. It's connected. It's not only connected to the brain, but the whole body through the vagus nerve, because what happens in the vagus, that is VAGUS, does not stay in the vagus, but goes to the whole body. So how you sleep, how you optimize stress, how you move your body throughout the day, this all has a direct impact on your gut health. And this has been shown. There was a study I shared that was from 2024, the Frontiers in Microbiology, that was talking about even just a couple of nights of sleep deprivation can reduce this beneficial bacteria called the bifidobacteria, and it can increase a pro-inflammatory strain called the proteobacteria. Like, why would you want to do that? You got to sleep. You cannot wait till sleep to sleep until you're dead. Like I used to think a couple of decades ago, right? I love the Cure 413 Dream, sleep when you're dead. You can't wait to do that because you will die sooner. So we talked about those tools, how to get a great night's sleep, how to move your body throughout the day. Tool number 4, we talked about how to strengthen that barrier function, the so-called healthy, happy gut instead of the leaky gut, which is so common and pronounced in today's society. So many people have it, which is marked by chronic inflammation, elevated, highly sensitive CRP, elevated just body aches and pains and brain fog and a lot of the autoimmune disorders actually come from a leaky gut. And this is now verified. This is not just some voodoo weird thing. Like leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability is actually a real thing, which we can see. We can see it on electron microscope. These cells called the enterocytes, which line the GI tract, which is literally your protection, your barrier between the outside world and your bloodstream. And it's one cell thick. And you have this protective mucosa or mucin that's out there that's made by this beneficial bacteria called Akkermansia mucinophila. So you got to promote that bacteria so it can help you out and you can be in this synergistic, symbiotic relationship so that it strengthens your gut barrier to get you protected from the outside world and partially digested food and toxins and bacterial invaders that could easily cross that single cell thick gut barrier and how to strengthen that. We talked about that last week, the gut as the barrier and the most prominent part of your immune system. Over 70% of your immune cells literally live in the gut. And we shared this study from 2025. It was in Nature, and it talked about how a compromised gut barrier was associated with not only inflammation, but also insulin resistance and poor metabolic health, as well as you can easily measure this with a highly sensitive CRP and a fasting insulin. So if you haven't done that yet, make sure you go to your provider and you ask for it. If they won't give it, you might need to look for another provider if they're not into that, if they're not aware of this process of increased intestinal permeability, because it is a real thing and we can see it. We can see it with the electron microscope. This is not voodoo medicine. This is real stuff, which is getting, fortunately, more well known over the years. Maybe in another decade, it'll make it into medical schools, but it may not have yet because it takes usually about 2 decades for this stuff to actually get incorporated into medical school curricula. I hope it happens more quickly. Right now, we're going to get into tool number 5, which is how to rewild your microbiota, which is nature's forgotten medicine. I mean, I love this part because it encourages us, me and you, to get outside and get some of that vitamin N for nature and how that can actually help us supercharge our gut. Like literally nowadays in our society, we spend way too much time indoors breathing recirculated air. And who knows if those filters are clean. If you're in your office space at home, you can clean them once a month and replace them. In the winter, I love to open up the window here and there, not all day because then my heating bill would be exorbitant, but I love to get that fresh air in. In Hawaii, the joke is, you want air conditioning, you just open up all the windows and you turn on them fans and you just keep that air circulating. And that's how we survive over there, which is not a bad thing because actually there you have the likelihood to have mold, right, in your homes. And when you keep the air moving and circulating, it's much less likely. Same if you live here in the mainland US and you're struggling in a place that has a lot of humidity, make sure you're cleaning those vents, make sure things are running, you have the air flowing. Airflow and circulation is key and critical. And getting outdoors to get yourself out in the wild to rewild yourself. There was a whole book written on this in the last couple of years about rewilding your microbiota, which is really just as simple as getting outdoors, slipping off your shoes, getting some grounding in, walking barefoot on the grass or on the beach or at the lake or wherever you can get outside and just get connected with the real wild world, right? Get out of the big buildings where you may be living or doing your office work or whatever. Get outside, get outdoors, because modern living has not helped our microbiome, right? Being in air-conditioned rooms, using antibacterial soaps, chlorinated water, it may have made us quote unquote cleaner, but it hasn't made us healthier. In fact, the incidence of autoimmune disease, asthma, all these things is sharply on the rise since we've become quote unquote industrialized, right? And so we need to get outdoors. In fact, there was a 2025 study out of the Lund University, which found that people who spend at least 2 hours per week, that's it, 2 hours per week. That's like 15 minutes a day. Nothing that we couldn't easily do had a 30% higher microbial diversity and lower inflammatory markers like that highly sensitive CRP, for example, compared to those who didn't get outside. So simple, literally can be done in 15 minutes each and every day. Remember, I already am encouraging us, myself included. I would never ask you to do something I'm not willing to do, to get outside in that morning light. If you can do so in a place where you can actually slip off your shoes, might be a little hard this time of year. I know for me, right now I'm in the mountains of Utah at 9,000 feet elevation, and it is cold out there. It's about 10, 15 degrees these mornings lately, and I'm not going to be walking around barefoot, but if you can get outside and get the fresh air, it's so helpful. Literally, this study out of Lund University just this year, here in 2025, found that those who can spend 20 minutes a day, actually a little less than that, but 2 hours on average per week, had a 30% higher microbial diversity. And we learned last week that that's how you measure a healthy gut. Increased diversity, right? And the way you get them diverse is not only eating diverse foods, but also getting outdoors and rewilding yourself. In fact, the more you connect with nature, the more your inner nature, your inner ecosystem, if your microbiota remembers what health is like. Like legit, healthy is wild. Wild and healthy and strong. So rewild yourself by getting outdoors. I'll share with you briefly about a client I work with. We'll just call her Sarah for these purposes. She was in her 40s, about 44 years old, and she worked remotely. And she worked in her home. She rarely left. And when we started working with her, not only did we do this 30 foods challenge, which I shared with you last week, but I said, hey, how about getting outside every day? Get that morning light. It'll help your sleep. And she was in a place that was warm, so she's able to walk barefoot on the grass. She also started a garden. She got out there a couple days a week, and she took her, she had a little puppy that she was taking out for walks anyway. So she was doing that with her puppy. And this legit changed her life. Like in just a month, she got much better sleep because she was getting outdoors in that first couple of hours of the morning for about 15 minutes or so. She was getting the morning light. Her digestion also improved. Her mood lifted. I mean, no surprise, getting outdoors is awesome. That's why I call it vitamin N for nature. So here's the goal for this week. I want you to spend 20 minutes per day, maybe 15, 20. Start with 15, work up to 20 every day outside. And this can be easily accomplished because I'm already challenging you to get out in the morning light and to walk for 10 minutes after every meal. So if you can walk outdoors, you can easily accomplish that. That'd be 30 minutes a day. Also, if you're in a place where you can do some gardening or where you can walk barefoot on some lawn or at the beach or wherever that is, it's also amazing to be grounded that way. Here's another thing that you might want to consider is take a look at the soaps that you're using or these antibacterial sanitizers and things and maybe have a second look at that because that's been shown to decrease your microbial diversity and also kind of screw up your own microbiota or your living organisms that live with you and on you symbiotically and synergistically, and maybe just replace it for some plain water with some mild biodegradable and soap that is not harsh, that doesn't have these harsh chemicals. There's there's something to be said for simplicity. I just use water for most things, and yeah, maybe look at your toothpaste, right? Many of our toothpaste have all kinds of chemicals, and maybe take a look at those and try to get rid of the fluoride, get rid of the harsh chemicals. My grandfather, he lived to be almost 100. He was 90 some odd, and he just used baking soda and water for his toothpaste. So not a bad idea. He lived really long and well. He also had diabetes, and he never ended up losing anything, no digits, no vision, didn't have kidney damage or anything because he took care of himself. And one of the things he loved to do was use simple things like, yeah, baking soda and water for toothpaste. And he loved to get outdoors and go for walks. And so here's the goal for this week. Get outside 15, 20 minutes each and every day if you can. Walk barefoot even in a place where you're able to do that. Limit harsh bacterial soaps and cleaners and things. And take a look at your water too, how your water is derived. Is it chlorinated? Is it, can you get a filter instead, like a reverse osmosis filter? Is your water fluoridated? And, I'm so fortunate because two out of the three places I live in the world, both Utah and Florida, they don't allow fluoride in the water anymore, which is amazing. I think it's great because people should be able to choose that. It shouldn't be forced upon you. So that's an amazing thing. So rewild yourself. That is the tip and trick for this week. That's tool number 5. Tool number 6. This one's interesting because tool number 6 talks about the gut wreckers. In fact, I have a whole chapter in my book on the gut wreckers, and many of them are both over the counter and other medications that we may be taking, which can be harsh on our gut. Now, here's the truth. The average US folk, that lives in a developed world, say US or Canada, is using over a dozen different either chemicals or medications daily that can alter their gut. These include your soaps. These include over-the-counter medications like the antacids, for example. Most of them totally screw up the gut because they screw up the pH and it just alters the balance of everything, can make it very difficult to absorb things like vitamin B12, for example. Antibiotics, of course, can potentially wreck your gut. There was a recent study that came out just this past a year ago, 2024, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which showed that only a single course of antibiotics, one single course of broad spectrum antibiotics can reduce beneficial bacteria by up to 70% for over 6 months. Like, can you imagine? So if you really need them, like, yeah, absolutely. If you're septic or you have a bad infection, you need antibiotics. But if you do take them, make sure you're also adding probiotics and lots of fiber to make sure the good bacteria isn't totally getting wiped out because one course of antibiotics can affect you up to 6 months. So remember this during flu season because I know a lot of people that have this mistaken impression that, oh, every little cough and sniffle, a sinus, infection, what have you, needs an antibiotic. Almost all of these 90+% will resolve on their own without antibiotics. So only take antibiotics if you really, really need them. And if you do, add some probiotics to that because even this study just recently in the JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, shared that you can lose up to 70% of your beneficial bacteria with one course, and this can last up to 6 months' time. So remember that every drug, every medication, everything you're putting into your body has potential for downstream effects. And a lot of this starts in the gut. So let me just share with you quickly about a guy that I worked with, we'll just call him David for this purpose. He was in his 50s, 56 years old. He had reflux, the heartburn that a lot of us have, and he was taking daily over-the-counter anti-reflux medication, and this totally screwed up his gut. He was getting infections all the time. he wasn't digesting his food well. It totally alters your pH. It screws up a lot of absorption of special vitamins like B12, for example, and it just really messed him up. And so what we did is we changed his diet a bit and we added mostly real fiber, right, from plants. And also we put him on some psyllium husk, that's Psyllium, psyllium. He needed some extra fiber in his diet. And within 6 weeks' time, his reflux had totally cleared up. And what was interesting is most people don't know this, but reflux is often worsened when you add in these kinds of um, over the counter and other medications that alter the pH of your stomach. It's actually better for your stomach to have an acidic environment because that's what keeps the bacteria at bay and keeps things digested appropriately. And so often what I'll end up doing is I add back that acid into the stomach so that you can digest better. And this, I know oddly enough, it sounds crazy, but often in people, it'll help clear up their reflux. I know it sounds totally opposite of what is often done in the real world, but most doctors don't know about this. They don't know that you actually need more acid in a lot of cases to digest your food better, to keep the right gut bacterial presence and to get the invaders out, right? There's a purpose for your stomach to have these proton pumps that produce acid. It's on purpose. It's for an advantage for you. And when you block those, it's going to mess things up and screw up the whole balance that's there for you. So I would say this. I mean, you want to review all the meds that you're taking, hopefully with a provider that understands this stuff or a holistic pharmacist that understands this integrative approach because there's a lot of medications that can screw up the gut. In fact, I pulled up a list for you. Let me see if I can just find that briefly, which was pretty surprising. Of all the different classes, antibiotics are pretty obvious. A lot of the antidepressants, antipsychotics, the beta blockers, and other blood pressure medicines, of course, the proton pump inhibitors. There was even a recent study on some of the mood altering medications like benzodiazepines, which can affect the gut bacteria. And it's very interesting how these can really screw up the bacterial balance in your gut. And so make sure you discuss these kinds of things with your provider because most of them don't know about this stuff and just kind of review them. I would say at least every 3 to 6 months and ask the question, do I really need to be on this medication? Because a lot of times one medication is thrown to overcome a side effect of another medication and things can really get out of hand in a hurry in this thing that we call polypharmacy, which is very, very, very common nowadays. And so the other medication class that besides the H2 blockers and the acid reflux medications like PPIs. Another one that's commonly used and over the counter, of course, is the NSAIDs, right? The non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications like ibuprofen, Aleve, all these kinds of Advil, Motrin. These tend to wreck the gut as well. And so try to limit those. I mean, do you really need to use that stuff? Maybe you can try curcumin or some of the more natural anti-inflammatories. And of course, the diet is probably the best approach to decrease inflammation in our body through eliminating the big three, right? The highly processed foods, which include the highly processed grains and flours, the highly processed sugars, the highly processed seed oils. Those are a likely culprit with inflammation. And maybe when we can get that inflammation at bay because we're not eating those big three, this should be able to help reduce inflammation. Maybe we won't even need any of these anti-inflammatory medications because they are not awesome. They can screw up our gut in so many different ways. Also, think about simple things you can do. Start drinking out of glass instead of plastic bottles, or switch to stainless steel, or, don't buy those big cases of bottled water because maybe you can just replace that with a filter that does reverse osmosis in your home. Or choose organic produce over the non-organic when possible to limit the pesticides. Because if you think about it, eating foods that are highly pesticide laden, which is basically anything non-organic in the berries department, right? Strawberries, blueberries, these you really got to get organic. I mean, they spray the crap out of this stuff with pesticides. Also, things like apples and grapes, things that you're going to eat directly. If it has a shell on it, or if it has, say avocado, which you're not going to eat the outer peel, or an orange, things like that, you may not have to be so hardcore about always getting organic, but buy organic when you can, especially when you're eating the peel, when you're eating the whole fruit, because those pesticides, think about it, they can wreak havoc on your gut. Literally, it's like eating antibiotic-laden food because those are meant to kill off all kinds of organisms and they're going to mess with your gut too. So just keep that in mind. And if you need help with that, there's a really great list called the Dirty Dozen of sort of the foods to avoid when they're non-organic. And then the Clean 15, those that you can eat and not worry too much about it, even if they're not organic. And that's on the Environmental Working Group website or ewg.org. Great, great little tools to have at the ready when you're at Costco or any other place shopping. Make sure to do your best to try to get organic. And so once you've kind of reduced the insults, whether it be over-the-counter medications like we talked about, the NSAIDs or the antacids and things like that, it's time to rebuild. It's time to get the good stuff back in using targeted nutrients, using more fiber, like we talked about. We're going to talk about in the next tool, which is tool number 7. We're going to talk about the top supplements and the top nutrients that can help you rebuild your gut. Because supplements, remember, they're not magic pills. They just amplify your health, and they truly are meant to be supplemental. So you got to start with real whole foods and hopefully plenty of fiber, 30 to 60 grams. I'd aim for 40 or 50 at least. I try to get 60 grams of fiber per day. And then also not only the fermented foods that are probiotic rich, but make sure you're giving the probiotics a chance to take root, if you will, because you've given them a healthy environment, which plenty of fiber, so that they can help work for you. So supplements are indeed supplemental. They do fill in the gaps. Make sure you start with a very diverse plate, right? Do the 30 plant challenge, do the fermented foods that we talked about in the very first part, tool number 1, I believe. And then think about some other key nutrients that can help rebuild your gut. Some of the ones that I love to use are things like L-glutamine. That's actually fuel to help the lining of your gut. It speeds up the repair of that epithelial layer, that layer that I talked about. It's literally one cell thick that keeps the bacterial invaders out and the toxins out. Like, it's one cell thick. It's so important to get this healthy and strong. And L-glutamine is super helpful for that. Also, collagen. Collagen is amazing. Bone broth or wherever you like to get your source of collagen, whether it's a supplement or in bone broth with plenty of glycine and proline, that rebuilds that connective tissue, that healthy barrier. Another great thing to consider is zinc and zinc carnosine, which that's been shown to decrease the gut permeability, decrease leaky gut, and promote healthy mucosa. The omega-3 fats are amazing. They help lower inflammation. As I've shared about in many other podcasts, it's makes the list of my top 5 each and every time are the omega-3s. And then, of course, magnesium. It's my favorite of all times as far as the minerals go. What that can do is it helps relax the smooth muscle in the gut. It supports your motility. And that could be either glycinate or threonate. Those are my 2 favorites. And then finally, my favorite food that helps the gut, and in addition and beyond the fiber, is the polyphenols, which are the colorful, vibrant fruits, vegetables from things like pomegranate and berries and cacao and green tea. And they actually help feed the beneficial microbes as well. Polyphenols, do not underestimate them. They are amazing. In fact, just a recent study this year in the Frontiers in Nutrition, there's a 2025 study that confirmed that glutamine and zinc carnosine and the omega-3s together significantly reduced intestinal permeability in adults with chronic inflammation. So those 3 got the big go ahead for helping the gut to improve its healthy, I would say, barrier, if you will, to keep out the invaders, to prevent leaky gut. Those 3 supplements were studied in this 2025 Frontiers in Nutrition. So that's L-glutamine, zinc carnosine, and the omega-3s. A couple of my favorites. And remember, like I shared about last week, supplements are still supplemental, and they make up, maybe just the last 10, 20% of your overall health. You got to foundationally start with food first, make sure you're getting real whole foods, right? And then add in lots of fiber, the prebiotics, the probiotics, all these kinds of things, and make food your medicine and medicine your food. And then add in the supplements to augment that. Let me just share with you one of the clients I work with. We'll just call her Monica. She was 49 years old. She was an athlete. I mean, she was active. She was in every race that came to her town. And she had IBS for many years. She always had problems. Even when she did races, like she'd struggle with either, having the urge to go to the restroom, or she'd be real constipated, and she kind of had this cycle. And so what we looked at in her, not only did we go to real whole foods, increased her fiber to kind of regulate things. Then we added, once she got on a good regimen of fiber, then we added probiotics. We also added the glutamine, 5 grams a day. zinc carnosine as well. And we threw in collagen, and she loved bone broth. So we were doing bone broth each and every day. And within a month, she basically had no more bloating. She was having regular bowel movements. Her training and recovery were like next level. She literally told me that she didn't know she had this other level of fitness and performance, and it all started with the gut. So here's the thing. Here's a couple of simple things you can add in this week or soon consider. Add collagen to your diet or regime that's super healthy, or bone broth. I have a collagen that I love to take each and every day. If you need some recommendations, feel free to reach out to me. Also, magnesium is amazing, amazing, amazing for the gut motility. I love magnesium 3 and 8 because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It also supports healthy mood and healthy energy because you need magnesium to make the ATP energy currency. Zinc carnosine is great, or glutamine to add in as well if you still need some additional help to get that gut barrier intact so that you can heal from leaky gut, which we can measure that. We can take a look at your inflammatory markers like highly sensitive CRP. We can do some gut testing and things. And so there's some ways to look at that. If you need help with that, feel free to reach out. And so finally, to wrap this up with tool number 8, we're going to talk about some kind of hidden saboteurs to avoid, the so-called, what I call in my book, the gut wreckers. I have a whole, I don't know, chapter or two just on this because these are things that you don't often think about. And you can be eating really clean. You can be taking the appropriate supplements. And somehow, if you're not paying attention to these things that can wreck your gut, you can literally have little holes being punched in your barrier, in your intestinal epithelia that you're not even realizing. And some of the biggest culprits that I see, which you guys aren't going to be doing because we've talked about this ad nauseum, are ultra processed food, like things that have preservatives or emulsifiers, of course, the seed oils. These things not only feed the harmful bacteria, but they also punch holes in your gut due to inflammation. Inflammation is literally the enemy here. And other things that are in those ultra processed foods, like the sweeteners, the emulsifiers, the preservatives, they have been shown to decrease bacterial diversity and impair the gut. Like there's a bunch of studies looking at this, and I've shared many of them in the book. Even if they're things that they're no calorie stuff like aspartame or sucralose, they even erythritol actually recently was shown to affect the microbiome adversely. So you got to be careful. I mean, go with real sweeteners like honey if you need a sweetener, and try not to do the artificial stuff so much because it has been shown to wreak havoc on the gut. Another thing which you may not have known is stress. Chronic stress, this low level stress raises cortisol, right? And what it does is it actually thins the gut lining, which increases the permeability. So make sure you have a stress sort of optimization technique, whether it's breathing, going outside for a walk, doing some exercise to get your mind off things, whatever that looks like for you. Very, very helpful to get that gut healthy. And here's another couple of gut wreckers that, may not be popular to mention, but things like alcohol and smoking. These have been shown to decrease gut health and to increase leaky gut. Even just a moderate intake of alcohol can damage these gut barrier cells. Remember, alcohol is always a toxin. I mean, I love it when we hear about brain health and how to optimize our brain function, and alcohol, no matter how you chalk it up, it's always a poison. In fact, it's called a poison, and in all medical schools it's taught as a poison, right? It's ethanol, which is one of the toxic alcohols, and it shrinks the brain no matter what. And so if you do enjoy some wine on occasion, try to limit it to special occasions or the weekends. Certainly don't be drinking every single day. I mean, the initial research that I was taught in medical school that said, oh, you should be having a glass of wine every often for cardiovascular health. Those that's actually been found to be false. It's actually not helpful in the way that we thought, and you could get the same benefit, if not more, and without the adverse effects from just eating berries or grapes or these sorts of things, and not the alcohol, which is always toxic. So try to avoid alcohol as best you can. Sleep, if you're not getting enough, that adversely affects the gut. We've talked about that already. It lowers diversity. Certain medications, as I shared, like the over-the-counter antacids, the PPIs, the NSAIDs, antibiotics, can all be damaging to the gut. And then, interestingly enough, sedentary living, right? If you're just not getting up and moving enough, that adversely affects the gut. And I shared a study earlier in this podcast about that, comparing folks who were getting at least, I think it was just the standard 20 minutes a day about 150 minutes a week of activity, and they had a much improved bacterial diversity than those that were sedentary. And so this shouldn't be surprising. Most of these things are things that we should already be working on that you may have heard of, but maybe you didn't know that they also affect the gut. In fact, just last year, there was an article in the Cell Metabolism Journal that linked the ultra processed foods to what we call gut dysbiosis, which is when you have an imbalance of the healthy and the not so healthy bacteria, kind of leaning more towards the not so healthy bacteria and increased risk of inflammation. And in this study, depression. Depression was shown to be linked to poor gut health. And so not surprisingly, like we know that lots of our healthy, happy hormones like serotonin, I think over about 80% of it, some studies show up to about 90% of it is produced in the gut. So not surprisingly, you get a healthy gut and you may not have issues with depression. And there's actually been research in the last 5 years looking at a lot of the different mental health conditions from depression, anxiety, even schizophrenia, bipolar, which have been significantly improved through diets that would specifically target getting your gut healthy. So more fresh vegetables and fruits and fiber. And in fact, I have a whole new science looking at this, which is basically how diet can be used to help treat many conditions, including the mental health conditions like schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, all these things, which have been shown to improve significantly, if not resolve altogether, with eating for a healthy gut, doing the things that you're learning right now in this podcast. Like it's amazing. And I've seen it happen and it blows my mind each and every time that so much can happen from just changing your diet, getting rid of those processed foods, the highly processed grains and flours, the highly processed sugars, right? The seed oils, and replacing them with real whole food, plenty of fiber, 50, 60 grams a day of fiber is amazing. Prebiotic rich foods, all the things that we shared at the outset, whether it be kefir or sauerkraut or kimchi or the miso soup, these kinds of things. It's amazing how you can completely rewild yourself and literally conditions like depression, anxiety, these kinds of conditions, I've seen them completely disappear with getting your gut healthy. And so I'll share with you in closing, one of the guys I worked with in the past, we'll just call him Kevin, and he was living pretty healthy, doing everything right. He took supplements, he was exercising, he still felt bloated and fatigued, and he was eating lots of protein bars and energy drinks, and he thought these were all healthy. And so what he didn't realize is a lot of the stuff he was eating that was he thought healthy, these protein bars and things like that, they had seed oils, they had artificial sweeteners. Remember we talked about sucralose and aspartame, and even their erythritol can damage the gut. And once we replace these just with simple single ingredient whole foods, literally his mood improved, his energy went through the roof, and he said to me, quote, he said, I finally feel human again. And we just got rid of the highly processed stuff. Very, very simple. He was already doing a lot of things right. He was taking the appropriate supplements, he was getting plenty of exercise, but his diet wasn't as dialed in because he had lots of processed foods in there that he thought were healthy because they were actually quote unquote health foods and they were sold as health foods. And so getting rid of some of these gut wreckers may be the thing that's keeping you from that healthy gut that you want, that will help you in so many ways to decrease inflammation, get your brain sharp, and get rid of that brain fog, if you will. And so, with this, the gut wreckers step, I just want you to think about removing some of these processed foods and seed oils from your diet, maybe removing alcohol or limiting it. Maybe it's trying to avoid the artificial sweeteners. Make sure you're prioritizing the whole, real, the colorful foods most of the time. I would say, 80 to 90%. If you want to have some things once in a while that are processed, that's cool. I get that. I do that too, especially when I'm traveling and I don't have access to all my usual stuff. I'll sometimes eat a protein bar and things like that. But don't make it your norm. Make sure you go for single ingredient whole foods, number one, plenty of fiber, plenty of brightly colored polyphenols. We learned that they can help get your gut healthy. And then make sure you are optimizing your sleep, optimizing your stress, how you approach that, because those things can wreck the gut if you're not paying attention. Literally, these microbes depend on that. And so, in closing, just to wrap it up, you can heal your gut. it can happen quickly. It literally can happen in a matter of weeks. It can also be wrecked in a matter of weeks. Like we learned, if you take a course of antibiotics, these effects can last up to 6 months. But if you got to take them, you got to take them. But make sure you're taking probiotics, plenty of fiber, take them at night so they have the whole evening to replenish. And if you have questions, reach out to me, Dr. Thomas Hemingway on Instagram, Thomas Hemingway MD Facebook, or thomas.hemingway.com. I'd love to help you out because remember, your gut, it's not just a tube for digestion. Way more than that. It's an entire ecosystem. In fact, the DNA in those microbiota, the bacteria, the viruses, the protozoa, all the things that live in your gut, on you, in you, and whatnot, the amount of bacteria is much more, the DNA in those bacteria, viruses, fungi, etc., is more than the DNA in your human cells. Like there's literally more DNA in your gut than there is human DNA in your whole body. So they literally outnumber you, both in numbers of cells as much more DNA than we have. And so we should pay attention because they can be our partners in health or they can be our partners in disease. Remember, Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. And I don't disagree, but I would also say all health, all wellness, all healing also begins in your gut. So as you heal your gut, everything changes. Your energy, your focus, skin. We haven't even talked about that, but literally most skin conditions, most of these different autoimmune conditions like eczema and these bad rashes, psoriasis, things like that, most of them have to do with the gut. And literally, when I see folks with these kinds of rashes, the first thing that goes off in my mind is, I wonder what their gut is looking like right now. Because these things are, it's basically a manifestation of your gut health right on your skin. And as you clear up, or I should say, as you improve your gut health, these skin conditions almost always clear up too. Also, a lot of food allergies and other allergies and sensitivities tend to get better. Because remember, 70+% of your immune cells, which are those that are responsible for most allergies and whatnot, live in your gut. So when they get programmed appropriately and correctly by eating a real foods, healthy foods diet, like most of these food allergies go away. It's crazy because right now, modern day society, we're seeing way more food allergies than ever before. And why does that happen? It's because of our diet. We're eating these highly processed foods with highly processed grains, highly processed sugars, highly processed seed oils that are wrecking the gut. So it can be simple. If you rewild yourself and you get your gut healthy with real simple whole foods, this will change everything. Also, make sure you get outside, walk barefoot, get into the morning light, maybe diminish the amount of alcohol you're drinking. You don't need perfection, just consistency. These simple steps repeated over time will help you beyond your imagination. I mean, legit, I've seen these things clear up as you focus on your gut, clear up the skin rashes that I've shared, clear up lots of aches and pains and inflammatory conditions, like many types of arthritis can be cleared up this way. And just getting your body clear and sharp and focused again, getting rid of that brain fog. I've seen all of this improve with focusing on the gut. So if you're tired of guessing, you're tired of struggling with being tired, you're so sick and tired, right, of being tired, or you're struggling with brain fog, inflammation, whatever it is, or mystery gut issues, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to help you with this. It can be simple, and there is a way that you can be helped. This does not have to be your future. You don't have to live in this fog of brain fog or achy body or inflammation, all these things, trouble with your bowels, whether it be constipation, diarrhea, or crampiness, bloating. Like you don't have to live with that. There is a solution, and a lot of it resides in the gut and in gut health because I say, all health begins in the gut. So remember, it's not just about digestion. Your gut is primordial. It is important. It is vital to your overall health. So fuel it well, and it can take you wherever you want to go. Your gut health is that important. So remember, all health begins in the gut, and it can be easy. And you'd be surprised how quickly this can be fixed. So if you need help, feel free to reach out. I'd love to help guide you along. Until next time, a big aloha.